Just gonna get started with the introduction. I'll ask our speakers to introduce themselves, and then I'll ask them to, give us a little bit of an overview on the topic. Oh, Alex from Australia, fantastic. And after, we'll go through a series of discussions around the topic of a triple AI supply chain. Before we get started on the topic of triple AI supply chain, I wanted to let you know that our EIPM observatory on decarbonation is out. So we'll be sending you, many of you have been attending past webinars where I've been talking about the topic of decarbonation. So we'll send you the link to this new document, 60 pages, fully packed with checklists and tools that you can use to approach the decarbonation challenge and the change management associated to it. So we'll be sharing that together with the article that supports this webinar and with the few slides I'm going to be sharing with you today. So first, welcome to our speakers. I would like Patrick from O9. We've been working together with O9 for 2 years and a half now. Been guest in our masterclass program. Very interesting companies that really is really showing what we can do today with technology in supply chain. Patrick, want to say a word about yourself?
Yes, thank you so much, Hervé, also for the invite. And yes, a couple of years working together. We actually enjoy very much this, so thanks for that. I'm Patrick Lemoyne, based in Munich, Germany. Hello from soon-to-be Oktoberfest city. Everybody's getting really excited here. But coming back to the topic of supply chain, so we are providing of planning solutions with a long history that goes back to our founders who already founded a company called I2 that really set the benchmark when it came to planning and optimization. O9 is their second venture, and I'm in charge of our high-tech sector in an industry role, covering mostly high-tech, semiconductor, and actually also automotive, because I have a strong background in automotive. For about 20 years in this space, and before that, I was a management consultant with McKinsey, and that's it.
Thank you, Patrick. Fabrice, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I can. So if you can hear me well. So Fabrice Thomas, I'm Senior Vice President for Supply Chain of a company called Utract Clean Technology. I will come back in the presentation. Just one slide to show a little bit what we are doing and the complexity of supply chain in our environment. So now that's going to be about 30 years plus something in supply chain, different function, I think. My career, I've done almost all the job supply chain between category management, supplier quality, and all this kind of stuff. I work in telecommunication, in signaling railways, in robotics, in solars, and now in semiconductors. So we have worked for quite some years with Hervé. I used the support of EIPM in the previous company when I was in healthcare industry as one of the leverage of our transformation. So I would say now my main job is really focusing on the transformation of supply chain and creating different operating models. That we had the pleasure to detail a little bit with Hervé when we decided to write this article about Triple A.I. that support a little bit this webinar. And thanks Hervé for the invitation, and very happy, Patrick, to interact with you in this webinar.
A pleasure.
Well, thank you to both of you. That's really great to have you here. I'm going to take you through a couple of slides just to do a bit of a positioning on the topic and this kind of a title we choose for the article Triple A.I. In the past. So back in 2022, in May, June 2022, together with Fabrice, we wrote an article in the European Business Review titled Triple A.I. Supply Chains. And in fact, the Triple A supply chain was something that already existed and was a concept developed by Professor Lee from Stanford, who described best practice supply chain as being agile, adaptative, and aligned. And we felt that in the current world, with the support of technology, it was interesting to extend the concept to having a supply chain that can be agile and informed, aligned and interconnected, adaptative and intelligent. And we'll be sharing the slides and the article as well at the end of the webinar. You'll get everything into your package, so everything will be delivered to you. The concept of Triple A.I is also associated with the different time horizons. And I think this is something I personally rediscovered during the COVID period. There's nothing new talking about having planning horizons that can be short-term, mid-term, or long-term. But when the COVID appeared, and companies started to react, and supply chain managers, procurement people started to react, I see some very interesting patterns. Some people definitely started to focus on handling, the emergencies and the short-term challenges. Other people were more focusing on what does it mean for the mid-term, longer-term horizon. And I also had the pleasure of coaching people through that period that were really great at operating across multiple time horizons at the same time. They were taking the lessons from Horizon 1 in order to build Horizon 2 strategies and creating their future supply chain. If we think short term, the only thing we can do is maintain and defend our position, our core business, our performance. We can fix and improve, the way the organization operates. If we think about longer term, we can evolve and change. And that's where we need to integrate the broader supply chain in order to reach that level of alignment and interconnectedness between different organizations that are together able to deliver performance. And long-term basis, we need to be able to transform so we can adapt and we can leverage intelligence to be able to, be future ready, able to deal with a broad diversity of context change and issues that might be emerging. All supply chain can have different pace, If you're in the fast consumer goods, you'll be facing very rapid evolution, and maybe your long-term horizon is only in 1.5 years. If you are in the defense industry, maybe your long-term horizon is going to be in 10 years, in 15 years. So, this will vary. The pace of change varies from one industry. The pace of supply chain varies from one industry to another. But across, we need to be able to navigate this different time horizon in order to develop the Triple A.I supply chain. So the idea of the Triple A.I model was that being agile and informed, we can have a control tower capability, we can have real-time orchestration, and we have a direct impact in terms of result on quality, cost, delivery, and P&L impact, the short-term, performance impact. Thinking in terms of the second time horizon, being aligned and interconnected, we've got this ability to manage the flow end-to-end and to have an integrated value chain that really is here to help deliver the corporate strategy, the customer centricity that can bring some competitive advantage for the business over the long term. And then long term, we want to think broader. We want to consider all potential complementers, suppliers, new technology, the complete ecosystem in order to be future ready, to be able to contribute to a broader strategic resilience and have impact in terms of social, environmental performance that's going to be positive. So that's the different dimension and the different logic. We'll be discussing these throughout the next 50 minutes, but that was the introduction. So maybe I'd like to start with Fabrice, and we can go through your introduction. Why is Triple A.I important? How can we enable such transformation? What's expected you, acting as a chief supply chain officer, to what do you expect from technology today? I'll go through the slides. You let me know when you want me to.
Yes, you can move to the slide because it's quite important to put that in the operational context and the context of the company I'm working for now. So just if you can move to the next slide, and just one page about what is ultra clean technology. So we are a contract manufacturer, not an OEM. Contract manufacturer of equipment that are used in the production of semiconductor. So we are, I would say, a tier 2 of the Intel, TSMC, the one that manufacture the semico. This is a very high-tech industry. Actually, I would say under scrutiny of many governments, as you probably heard around all the challenge on the semico industry. And this is what definitively today brings us in a situation where the capability to anticipate the information, not even to simply capture the information, is essential for us. And I will give some example just after. So it looks to be a quite simple business. We are a company that is now 2.2, 2.3 billion, something like this, with 7 factories across the globe, in 3 in US, in Israel, in Czech Republic, and Penang in Shanghai, and Singapore. So one small one in Philippines. So quite spread in terms of manufacturing footprint, in terms of supplier footprint. The things also which give a little bit of complexity to our business is, as a contract manufacturer, we are directly linked to the customer. But when I say we are, this is the supply chain. So my counterpart, they are the supply chain head of our customer. So big company like Lam, like Applied Material, perhaps, that you have heard about. And there is a connection in between our sales and sales administration, but the most important is supply chain to supply chain, because the model that they are trying to design to support all the problematic related typically to the relation in between China and US, or the dual source, or the growth of capacities, kind of things. We are dealing directly with the supply chain head. So just to summarize, if you can move to the next slide, please, Hervé. So just in very few number, this is a lot of supplier finally for a quite, I would say, small company. For 2.2 billion in this industry, this is quite small, but it's 5,000 supplier. Quite certain number of SKU that we have to buy across the globe, and those SKU, they can be for those who know, as much as sheet metal and frame, cable harnesses, these kind of things, but a lot of OEM parts. Like valves, fitting, or power supply, these kind of things. What is requested from our customer is finally simple, and across any supply chain looks to be the simple standard in between the TCO, having the right lead time, the flexibility related to the business. Nobody has the right forecast as usual to be able to increase and decrease the capacity depending on the market demand, but in a certain lead time, okay, having the capability to react quite fast to an event. That's also the capability for us to manage the currency, the different situation of exchange, because we are buying in many different countries, and we are manufacturing, for sure, as I was saying, in many different countries. What is much important in our industry, this is the geopolitical environment. So if you're not very much aware of what happened in the semico, there was some threat, we will call it like this, from US to China, to the US company that were manufacturing in China, to prevent any development of new technology, to make it simple, in China. which means, in other words, to stop any kind of activity operated by US company in China, which is in relation with high-tech industry and notably semiconductor. So the big question actually, or which is a move, finally not anymore a question, is how the different supplier and contract manufacturer of equipment to manufacture those semiconductor, they will be able to relocate themselves in different countries. And all the questions come to where, how, which factory, for which time frame, which stability of economy, of government, etc. So all those questions, so all those information that finally are not much common at this level of importance in the design of the supply chain operating model. And if you can move to the last next and last slide, please, Hervé. Yes, here. So here I try to illustrate a little bit. Finally, what influenced the operating model that we are building, the new operating model that we are building in our company. On one side, we have the standard. This is the total cost, the freight, the currency, all these kind of things, the financial in general. But that's also how we create the footprint of supplier, so those SME support around the different factory that we are creating in light of this BCP China, but also from Asia to be able to spread a little bit our challenge and not to put everything in the same box, not in the same company. But this is also all the geopolitical factor, because there is a lot of demand and development that happen in South Asia. Then what does it mean? What does it mean in between the Asian organization with the China organization? What it means in between China and Taiwan, because the biggest manufacturer is in Taiwan. So how day after day this is moving, how this evolve, and how we have the capability to anticipate and not anymore to react, because when it's reacting, it's too late creating a factory. For us, this is 1 year, 1.5 years, and 9 to 10 months for a subcontractor. So it is really, really too late. So it's how we are able to gather, to collect those information, to anticipate a little bit different scenario of what could happen. So we do, I would say, a little bit of geopolitics all around, and how we can design some scenario depending on what will happen. So it is always being on the edge somehow of being ready. If we feel that something will happen, how we are ready then to transform our operating model and to continue to operate in a new environment. And this is where the Triple A.I makes absolutely sense. You saw the graduation of in between high controlled information, high impact the PNL. This is our daily job, we know it. Till the last point, which is what are the different scenarios I have in hand, actually, depending on any factor which evolve around our business, and which scenario I will take and I will implement. That's all where the Triple A.I makes sense, and the difficulty of collecting, transforming, and making the data in a certain intelligence scenario. Hervé.
Thank you, Fabrice. Well, yeah, excellent illustration of the challenge of running on multiple time horizons, still delivering on a day-to-day basis, building this integrated supply chain together with customers and suppliers, and also being able to adapt in intelligent ways to leveraging existing data by anticipating and building scenarios. Great. Thank you, Fabrice. Let's go to Patrick now. Maybe a different way of looking at this topic. So, Patrick, what's your take on the topic?
Yes, not dramatically different at all, actually. I think the premise described in the paper and what you and Fabrice have been covering is a lot about this pace of change. Okay, and I think that term that everybody's been using the last few years, resilience, or even worse, resiliency, is just a fancy term, but the idea is important. The idea is, how do you run a business successfully despite change, despite unexpected change, and actually the pace of it has been accelerating. So what we've seen, and which is very much also aligned with the ideas that we're going to talk about today and that are developed in the article, is companies that are very good at handling change, at this resilience, to use that new term, do two things very well. The first one is there is a degree of preparation. Of course, it depends on which time horizon we're talking about. But there's a number of proactive measures that companies can take to be better ready when change will happen, okay? So some of the topics, and Fabrice, you mentioned some of them, these geopolitical stress situations force companies to think about, should I bring, some of the manufacturing or my supplier base closer to my geographical area? So this whole nearshoring is a big topic. Am I too dependent on single sourcing? So multi-sourcing is again coming back as a topic, to look at as proactive measures to handle, disruption. But it goes all the way to product design. I look at the way I design my product. Can I, support late customization so that I can build a product that is generic, and then only at the last minute when I get a true signal of what the true demand is, configure it, perhaps even through software only. And that of course will help because you cannot perfectly predict. The other thing that in that topic of preparation that companies that do well invest in is really predictive capabilities. And here we're talking about demand predictions. I think, of course, there's only so much you can predict, but the technology available to us, and you've asked me to join this webinar because I also represent what technology can do today, is quite different. From the old statistical model, there's now much more advanced, AI ML models that take into account the true drivers of demand, and that really helps, develop much better predictive capabilities. Now, the other thing is there's only so much you can prepare. You still should do it. But these measures, of course, they take time. So what is another set of capabilities that is very, very important to develop is the ability to detect change as it happens, detect these disruptions as they happen, evaluate them, because some disruptions you don't care about, okay? It's going to affect some replenishment of inventory, but you already have enough. So that really doesn't matter. The opposite could be true. This is a critical part, and it was actually going to go into production to, an order for a very critical customer. Then of course, that is a very critical disruption, and you need to take, decisions according to this. So you need to detect quickly, you need to evaluate and sort which are critical and non-critical disruptions, and then decide and look at different options and scenarios. You need to have the technology that helps you identify inventory, see what it is reserved for. Is it a less important customer? Switch over. If I do it, do I have all the parts, etc. So this is very important to have that decision-making power, so that then you make a conscious decision. There are going to be trade-offs, okay? You're going to be sacrificing perhaps a customer for another one. You're going to incur additional costs for expedites, etc. You just want to make a fact-based decision as quick as possible. And, to the question, what has changed? Yes, of course, the past 2 years, there's been, more of that variability and complexity, but honestly, it was there before, and we're not going back to any kind of wonderful, stable world that we supposedly had before. So whatever capabilities we're talking about here to manage this level of change is critical. And this is obviously not only in the consumer space, where we've seen, of course, demand change rapidly when people couldn't shop anymore, moving more to, online and not going to restaurants and ordering instead, etc. But in the B2B space, the space, Fabrice, you're in, a high degree of change here for sure. So, what technology can do today is really handle the level of data that is available to help make decisions. I think all companies we talk to are aware and realize that there's a lot of data out there. But so it's not a lack of data today, it's a lack of insights. So being able to process the data, and you'd be surprised by the number of companies that are investing in data analytics, data science teams. That's why these data scientists are so rare these days, because everybody wants to have data scientists to be able to leverage the insights. So, a perfect example are, again, these predictive forecasting model. Starbucks, a customer of ours, is able to predict store by store. I mean, we're talking about 15,000 stores in the US. What is going to be on a day-to-day basis the demand for the different products that they serve, the different products that they make, the ones that they buy. They've got hard goods, but they've got all the coffees that they make, etc. And clearly, if over the weekend, it's a university game, there's going to be a lot of traffic, lots of people coming in, etc. Demand's going to spike up, so weather is an obvious one, etc. But you can take all these factors and correlate and do a much more precise forecasting. In the case of Starbucks, is at the store level, at the day level, at the reference level. Okay, with this, of course, you're much better equipped to handle change. Okay, that's really very powerful. And so I think that's, for me, this is where technology helps. Is, of course, it depends if you're in which of the three levels of planning that we're talking about, but the ability to use the data available today to drive insights and make better decisions. This is why I'm in this industry, because I think this is very, very, very powerful.
Thank you, Patrick. Well, that's very interesting, because this ability to predict, this ability to anticipate, that really brings me back to one of the reasons we got started with Fabrice to work on this topic. Because Fabrice, you were working in the healthcare industry before, and during the COVID period, you were able to quickly use COVID data to map the supply chain impact, and this was giving you a few days or weeks of advance compared to competitors in order to react and prepare to the future. And I think that example is a really good example of how data, time play together to give you an advantage. I don't know if you want to come back on this story a little bit, Fabrice.
Yeah, and I remember what Patrick was saying previously. I was in the healthcare industry, and that was during the COVID time. Coming to the scarcity of resources of data scientists, at that time I had the chance to have created a team of there was 20 people, something like this, if I remember, who were only looking after information, data, whichever the form they were, and able to transfer them in something which was usable by simple people like we are in supply chain. Just taking one example, we were in the middle of the COVID, and as a healthcare, of a company in healthcare, we were essential service, so capability to manufacture and to produce and to deliver. So we had at the time a dozen of factories across the globe, and 4 big distribution centers, one in Shanghai, one in Singapore, one in Germany, and one in the middle of US. And our job was to ensure the continuity of service, for sure for our customer, but we have to be honest also for the company. And so we were 21, something like this. And the question that we were asking ourselves, so you can imagine that when you have such distribution center and manufacturing site, you have a spread of supplier. At that time, we were managing about 750,000 SKU and something like 4,000 or 5,000 suppliers, all interconnected, definitively. So the question was, okay, when we were seeing the evolution of the COVID, how we were able to design a business continuity plan to ensure that the factory they will continue to run. And you can imagine that in the medical business, looking for dual source with all the certification, validation, the FDA, etc., it takes a lot of time. So the team had the intelligence to simply take a map of the world, to put the supplier, to put the type of product they were manufacturing, to put the interaction visually in between the different supplier and the different factory, that we understand in a simple VSM what was the interconnection in between the supplier and the factory. And finally, how much each of the supplier was linked to an essential element for our customer and a certain amount of revenue. And then from every information they could find on Google or else, and sorry, I'm in the airport. And for any information that they were able to find on Google, they were transforming it in a risk map of the evolution of the COVID. So every day we had the evolution of the number of COVID cases, which country had to close, which country could be open, what was the kind of restriction, etc. In a color mapping that we are telling us, okay, that suppliers is at risk, that put at risk that revenue, that put at risk this factory, and therefore to be able to increase the inventory as fast as possible and to transfer the inventory from one location at risk to another that was less at risk. So it was very ad hoc, manually designed, but very useful at that time. And coming back to the point of what can we do with data, the difficulty, and I think Patrick illustrated it very well, is that each of the company, we have thousands of millions of data. How many of the company really have a data strategy? How many know exactly what kind of data they need to use? What is the quality of the data? How they can make it more clean and how they can use it and to do what? And all that complexity is, I think, what strengthens the difficulty of implementing really a Triple A.I model like Hervé was referring to before.
Thank you, Fabrice, for this very illustrative example. Patrick, do you want to react to this discussion on data?
No, we're very well aligned. I think from my experience, the companies that do it well, again, is the ones that have a data strategy. And the investment in collecting the data pays off, okay? It needs to be driven by the pain point and the use cases, okay? So identify where is the biggest, what we would call the value leakage. So think of it, whatever the pain point or the KPI that really needs to change. And this is what's going to drive what data you're going to start cleaning up and collecting. Just doing a big data exercise for several years is not going to be helpful. It needs to be driven by what's the pain. In your case, in pharma, it's, you want to, maximize the availability of products, or you want to predict, where the demand is going to be, etc. And that drives then the strategy. But ideally, yes, there is behind that, there's a kind of chief data officer type organization where you start putting data, in a data lake or data warehouse or lake house or whatever, that it then suddenly is organized, over time, is organized and normalized so that it can become available for these kinds of use cases. Yeah.
Thank you, Patrick. The metaphor I use is, very often people talk about data as being like gold or oil, and I think that's really wrong, because I see data as being, a few uncut gems. There's a lot of data. There's a lot of, of this information that will be useless, some of it that will be very useful, different context for these. And data is full of uncut diamonds. And we need to polish and make sure that these diamonds are shining in the right way. And the light is moving from one of these diamonds to another. So data gets connected together to deliver the value. And that's really what makes a difference. It's not just about owning a certain piece of data, but it's building, the interconnections between the data, getting them to, shine on each other in order to reveal the insight that Patrick was describing before, and that Fabrice described through his example. Let me go through, maybe a number of questions. Some of them we've started to address already. Some of them we can go more into depth, but this can be the basis for our discussion. So, this 3-time horizon. Patrick, anything to add to the 3-time horizon? Anything you think important to mention?
Yeah, no, I think this distinction first is important. There are clearly decisions at different time horizon, because the for me, the main difference is the space of options you have is different. In the short term, you obviously are much more constrained in what you can do, but you also have much less time to do something, okay? Which is very different from if you're making decisions in the long term. You can, as Fabrice said, you can now build the plant, okay? You can change your sourcing strategy, which you cannot do in the short term, okay? But the reality is, you know, it's a bit artificial also to separate it, because if you only look at the short term, you can mostly react and you cannot really change the root cause, okay? So you have delays in products and supplies coming in, but the issue may well be that, you know, it's the supplier that is unreliable. So the solution is not only to expedite or reshuffle your production plan, the solution is to change your supplier, or at least recognize that for critical products or critical product launches, you don't want to use him anymore. So that's where, you know, this is actually a smooth separation between the short term, the midterm, and the long term. So you really have to look at that a little bit holistically. And that reminded me of one of the analysts of Gartner in supply chain, Pia Lund, actually wrote an article that made actually quite some noise, or paper on the end of SNOP. But her argument was not the end of SNOP. Her argument was the end of this strict separation of these different planning layers, very much driven also by limitations in tools and data. So we go back to technology that forces you to build different models and use different software to handle, you know, short-term planning versus medium-term planning versus long-term planning, when really you wanted this to be, of course, a more continuous planning. The fact that, again, there's things you observe in the short term that you have to handle in the short term through an expedite or changing, reshuffling your production schedule, etc. But you have to handle the root cause, which is then more in the medium term and long term. And I think that's a good signal. And I actually like that approach.
Oh, that's music to my ear. Thinking in sync across the different time horizon. Fabrice, any comments about this time horizon?
Just one question first to Patrick, because you had a chance to visit many potential customer and customer. How many of the, in percentage roughly, of the supply chain organization have dedicated data scientists, and how many of those companies has really a data strategy related to supply chain?
Yeah. So I don't have the
I know
numbers, so I'm not going to say.
No, but from your feeling,
Yeah.
from your feeling.
So I think honestly, the data strategy, quite a few organizations have it. Few have a CDO organization, so you don't need official, you know, chief data officer reporting to, you know, the CEO, etc. But the number that start perhaps with at least a central data warehouse and data lake strategy, and of course, as soon as you have this, you need a data steward that recognizes, okay, if I put data in this warehouse and applications are going to use it, you know, how to ensure the quality, is that the single version of the truth, etc. So actually, I worked in the pharma industry. One of my big customers had a very clear, actually, they do have a CDO, but they had a clear data lake strategy, and it was all about, this is a single version of the truth. There is no analytics, from the most simple report to the more complex machine learning tool that doesn't use the, you know, certified data set, as opposed to, hey, that's the file I have on my computer and it looks different from yours. We've never had these discussions, have we? So I think I see a lot of companies doing this. Also, surprisingly, a lot of companies investing in data science. Of course, large companies have the advantage that they're, you know, richer and can afford the data scientists. But there's a true eagerness to exploit data, and I think companies are not blind. They're looking at the competition, either in their industry, they're looking at lighthouse companies outside of their industry, and recognizing that, man, I need to do something with data. Okay, so I'm a runner, and on my iPhone, there are like 4 apps from Nike. Nike knows when I go running, how often I go running, with what shoes I go running, you know, what I've put in my shopping cart that I haven't bought yet, etc. And to leverage that data and make recommendations on what I should buy and offer me a promotion is super powerful. And all companies knows that they need to do this. You know, it's an expensive proposition, but I see a lot of them investing for sure.
And you took the right point just to answer then your question, Hervé. working on time horizon, okay, you can work 15 hours a day, that's fine, etc. Everybody can do it. It's just super exhausting. And what we are doing, all of us, we are using mail and email, and we exchange information like this on email. And what Patrick was underlining is that the big change is when the companies start to have a data lake strategy, where all information can be accessible at any point of time from anywhere in the world, and any work that is done during daytime in Shanghai then can be used and completed by some people in Europe, and by the end of the day finalized by people who are in US. And only if you have a direct access of data which are secured in a way but easily accessible, and the data lake is well, for me, the cornerstone of all that way of working. If you have this, then after, the point is only about which kind of whatever Power BI, ClickSense, or modelization of information you can use. But working on time horizon like this can only be done if there is an exchange of data and if there is an easy access to the information and data.
And for me, the other condition is that there is someone that also certifies that this is correct data, okay? Because there are so many duplicates and different versions of the data. Then you start making decisions and KPIs, from basic KPIs all the way to AI models on not correct data, not fresh data, not harmonized data, etc. And so as soon as you have a data lake strategy, the next step is you need to put data structure and there's this term of a data stewardship, so the owner of the data to ensure that, this is the single version of the truth, and that's super important.
And then we have to recognize, we can speak longer about it, and then we have to recognize that data scientist is a real job. It's not because we have been educated using Excel that we are able to do Python, or that we are able to program and set Power BI and these kind of things. And that variety of resource, we have to recognize that it is essential now to recruit as professional data scientists within the supply chain, people who understand the business, and really you can make the connection in between the technical IT world, I would say, and the simple user that we have in supply chain, the category manager, the buyer, the planner, and else.
One of the challenge I find is sometimes we've been thinking about access to data as if everyone would be able to get information on a mobile phone, and this creates a push of pushing decisions to the lower level. And I think that that's dangerous because it's possible in theory to provide the right data to the right person at the right time, but some of the decisions can't be pushed to individuals at the lower level. And I think it was very interesting for me we had in one of our events recently some of the people from Flex, and instead of pushing the all the data, the information on like a mobile phone or a tablet, they've been building this control room with big screen where people can come together to take decision. So data access for me is also very much about our ability to collectively visualize data, drill down if needed, and take decision together in front of some data.
And this is where Hervé, when we can speak about democratization of data. And when we speak about democratization, this is not only to allow anyone to access information and data, but the way the data are structured, are transformed, are presenting, depending on the audience. I mean, you will not provide the same information on the TCO, on the cost breakdown whatsoever of the product to a buyer, and the same level of information to a CEO. Even they want both of them want to know what will be the gross margin and the impact of the saving or this kind of thing. But mastering the data and transform them in a way that it is usable and interpretable. You were referring to Flex, and I had the chance to visit the two war room. When you come in, it's obvious this is just self-learning. It's extremely easy to understand because it is accessible for people who are in supply chain. I'm not sure if we put a finance person in, that it will be easy for them to understand exactly what we understand when we see all the move in this flow of material in those war room. So it is really the ability to make it understandable by the person we have to interact with.
I think.
Patrick?
No. I also have seen these war rooms, or a customer actually called them game rooms to avoid any kind of war connotation. But I think what it epitomizes is what we talked about, is connecting the data. Okay, so this is not a set of different data files. It's recognizing that I receive a signal from a supplier. I can connect it because I understand which parts are affected. These parts are in transit as shipment, so I connect the shipment and ETA, expected arrival time information, to that shipment. I can tie it to the order behind it, etc. So it's when you are able to tie together all these disparate bits of information to tell an end-to-end story, that you understand that this disruption on one end actually impacts this customer on this day and this order. Okay, so that's the power of what software can do in the background, because as a human, you'd have to do this manual connection. It would take forever. The software can already do this for you. The other thing what these systems do is, we talked about learning. I mean, you mentioned learning, Fabrice. There's also really this machine learning, where through seeing all these individual transactions, etc., the system will detect, there's nothing magical to it. It's statistics, will detect that, wow, this route, which we thought takes 3 days, or the shipping lane that's supposed to take 2 weeks, is actually trending up. It's now actually taking 3 days, 3 weeks, or there's a dependency. If it ships on Fridays, then it's systematically late. That the system can detect and learn from it and inform the planners and say, hey, if you ship on Friday, don't ship on Friday, because you need to count an extra day. And so I think there's a lot that the software can do to help make the information much more useful to the user, and do all the heavy lifting in the background, if you want.
So yeah, very interesting example. Day-to-day data that can be used to address, short-term issues, can also help to inform, thinking differently about the way of organizing a supply chain. Any other point you'd like to, related to a real-time data, taking decisions? I think we've started to discuss that, but is this like, do we need always real-time data, or is it important? Any comment on that?
But that's obvious. You need a real-time data, even if it's not the only data that you have, because you need to control. Real-time data is just the confirmation of to keep under control of the different scenario that you have illustrated, that you have put in place, and the strategy that you have put in place. So that's allow you, yes, to check if these are checkpoints for me, the real-time data, but that's not the essential information you need to have to work and to plan the future.
No, I agree. So the real-time data is important because, as you just said, it's the junction between the plan and the reality. But at the same time, if you go back to one of these key learnings, which was, in the time of change, you need to detect change as soon as possible. So that's where the real time is important, because if you detect 5 days later, you have 5 days less to address the situation, okay? Which means you've been doing for 5 days the wrong thing, and you have less options also potentially to correct. And if you could have 5 days earlier accelerated the shipment, this is no longer feasible. So there's a lot of value, and that's why a lot of focus has been on these real-time transportation visibility solutions. But I'd say also demand sensing is a way also to accelerate it, to give you a real-time signal of what people are buying. Okay, demand sensing, you see it a lot in consumer goods. It's seeing what is actually being consumed right now and gotten out of stores. Guess what? We're back to data. The ability to get the scan data, this point of sale data. What are people buying right now today? Which flavor of my product, which type of packaging of my product is working, and which promotion is working and which not, is a signal you want to instantly have back. I was talking to a chief supply chain officer in the beauty industry, and his story was, overnight, an influencer puts on, some pictures on Instagram or videos on TikTok of a lipstick in a new color. Literally within 12 hours, millions of young women around the world, from Tokyo to Paris to New York, go to stores, go online, and want that lipstick. That's the speed, okay? So the quicker you can sense this with real-time data, the better you're equipped to trying to fix your supply chain.
Okay, let's maybe move to some of the next topic and maybe discuss a little bit about this kind of visibility across the supply chain and how we are heading toward further visibility across the supply chain. One of the things I find interesting these days is to see more and more companies talking about sharing data. In many ways, in the past, if I take the automotive sector, I would see big OEM saying, I can make things happen alone. I can pull my supplier. I can make a difference alone. But we've got more and more opportunities these days, but also more and more push for creating data commons, data pool that can be used across a supply chain, and that can help feed some of these models, feed some of these decision-making process. I like your reaction on this. I mean, on this transparency, on this more end-to-end visibility data sharing, what do you see happening these days?
Oh, but I can take one example. I was saying I'm contract manufacturer for big American companies. So the minimum is that we share information. And why? Because when there is a governmental decision or an information coming from the US Congress related to semiconductor, then all of us in the industry, so all the chain to our SME supplier, we have to translate it in what does it mean for us in terms of business, what does it mean in terms of timeline, how we have to operate. And now it goes so fast that on a regular basis, it has been several times a week, we have, from my team and I, we have meeting with the supply chain of our customer to understand exactly what they want to do, what is the pace they want to do. Do they want to leave China? Do they want to leave Taiwan? And if they want there, by which country they want to go and how we're going to go and what are the priorities. So the necessity of understanding the information, and I speak here data as an information, translated in what the meaning in terms of constraint, and based on those understanding how we have to operate all along the chain, okay, from the OEM, contract manufacturer, and the different supplier, it is essential. Without sharing this data, I mean, this is the end. We can close the door and finish the company. This is the essential part for us of the continuity of our business.
Yeah. So of course, tier one is essential and I would say easier to realize. Tier two, tier N is something like a holy grail. And certainly you're in the semiconductor industry these days. These semiconductor shortages, which have affected every industry, is a tier N problem. So if you're an automotive manufacturer, you don't buy the chips directly unless it's it's Tesla and you buy your GPU. But it's affected companies and they're all thinking, okay, how do I get tier N information? So my supplier's supplier information, and this is really tough. Suppliers don't tell you who they buy from, etc. And so there are initiatives. They've always been initiatives. 20 years ago, we tried to create these marketplaces, starting with high tech. And then right now, the automotive industry is restarting again here in Europe with an initiative called Catena X to try to do this. But this is going to be super hard. It's a massive change and cultural change. And it's not a technology problem. Technology can give you the information. It's other suppliers.
This is a matter of IP, sharing,
Yes.
specific knowledge.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's definitely an asymmetry of the benefit as well. No?
Yeah.
Very clearly with the Catena X, there will be a lot of benefits for the OEMs, the car manufacturer, but probably the benefit will be less clear for someone who's the tier N supplier in the end.
Exactly.
Last word maybe on change management, you know. So we've been talking about data, how to integrate data for decision making, for different time horizon, the Triple A.I logic. So, you know, change management these days, the task is immense in terms of being able to think not just at the level of a single function, not at the level of a single company, but really thinking change management across a value chain. So if you had any kind of tips and suggestions on, you know, how to drive this type of change, what would that be?
I can start.
Yeah, please, Patrick.
As I was, preparing my notes for this webinar, I think the having a data-first mindset is really what came to my mind, and that kind of echoes what we were talking about earlier, Fabrice and I, on a lot of companies investing in data lakes, etc. So I think this data-first mindset is very important. Let's not boil the ocean. Okay, so I think it needs to be driven by small initiatives. They are driven by the company strategy. Okay, what are we focusing on? Is it inventory reduction? Is it service level? Whatever it is, or do we have a obsolescence problem, typical in high tech? So identify the business case that really is important to the company, and then create a multifunctional team, because this is not an AI problem. This is not a data. You can't put a data scientist without supply chain background, without understanding of technology and obsolescence, if that's the problem you want to solve. So you create a multifunctional team, AI, the data scientists, but also business people, IT, because you need to connect it, etc. And these guys create a prototype, a solution, etc. And then from there on, and actually I've seen companies do this with multiple initiatives. I was with a company last week, actually in your hometown in Singapore, and they have, in every single part of the business, there are these teams being formed up. Okay, I mean, they're a tech company, so they see the value of data. And then some of these things won't bring the results, that's fine. Others will be great. And then you start building the backbone that, data strategy, data stewardship organization that starts collecting the data. Germany is sending a test warning. Okay, yes, I received it, thank you. Which also means it's 11 o'clock. And then start, creating the structure, putting this in this data lake, putting the data stewardship, etc. So start in a very pragmatic way, find use cases that bring value, and then think about how to scale and deploy. That would be my recommendation.
Thank you, Patrick. Last word from you, Fabrice?
I think we need to open a new seminar to speak about transformation in supply chain, if you want. That's a super long process, and definitively one of the backbone, as Patrick was saying, it's about data management and how we can leverage on data acquisition, intelligence around data, and how we can use it, and how finally we can transform the operating model of supply chain to integrate all those moving environments at the end to deliver the result expected by the company. But it's a fundamental change of just change management or change the organization. This is really a transformation of the operating model in supply chain.
Thank you. I
That's
think
the
we
key
have
word.
both advice, looking first at the bottom of the layers of the overall infrastructure, the data, and building up little by little capabilities that make a difference. I think we'll live with that. Thank you to both of you for being with me
Thank you
this
very
morning
much.
from different parts of the world. Thanks to everybody who's been joining this webinar. It's really been a pleasure. I think we've covered a lot of ground, and there's a lot of gems and very useful perspective. Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thanks, Fabrice. Thanks, Patrick. My pleasure.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.